facilitators. Dr. Imigo, welcome. Dr. Yumiko, is she still around?
Yes, I am just visiting. And hello, how are you?
Hi, thank you. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you very much. I will not stay the whole time. I have another meeting at the 4 o'clock, but I would love to listen until the next meeting. So thank you very much for letting me in.
So we do have an agenda that is very much packed, so we're not going to take a lot of time in introductions, but please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box so that we know who is in the house. And also just a few house cleaning rules. We are many, so please, if you're not speaking, we'll kindly request you to put off your video, turn off your video, so that we can conserve the bandwidth. And also let us all mute ourselves so that there are no interruptions during the sessions unless you are speaking. So with all that said, allow me to welcome the Education International, who are going to take us through the sessions today. Welcome, Henry and Tim. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pedi Anawi. I am regional coordinator from the EI office in Africa, based in Accra. Well, mine is just to present a few introductory statements to just, as the colleague has just said, to allow interactions and discussions around this topic today. Well, my introduction is about the curriculum assessments and learning across the continent. We are talking of the African continent. Well, my...
Can you press play, Paddy? Can you press play on your, if you can press play on your slideshow so that we can see the whole slideshow?
Okay. Let me see that, just a minute, please. Well, can you see it?
If you share your screen again, the slideshow's gone. So if you share the screen again and you press the play button at the top of the slideshow, and it will bring the whole slide onto the screen.
Oh, well, let me share again then. Sorry for the delay. Well, Martin, I think I faced some challenges with my laptop. Can we ask the tech to display my slides?
Wow, Yuna.
Yeah,
What's
thank
happening
you.
then? What is happening?
Yes, please. Thank you. So, I was saying, sorry for the delay, please. Well, I was saying that when we are discussing of the education system in terms of quality of the learning, maybe we need to have a kind of systemic approach to that analysis, where we look at teachers, at the curriculum, at the instrument used for teaching, and as well as the administration system, and see whether it is supportive. Can we go to the next slide, please? The goal of a successful education program, as we can see, is based on effective curriculum. And then we have to look and see whether if that curriculum meets the needs of the current demand of the culture, the society, and the expectations of the population that the curriculum is serving. We are saying this because, well, when we were adopting the education for all goals, the society had a culture and needs. And today we've moved and adopted the SDGs. And the SDG 4 comes with some expectations. In the same way, we have the CESA that comes with the same expectations that are connected to the needs of the African society. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, we have, as I was saying, the global and regional education objectives. Well, we have the SDG 4, which seeks to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. At the regional level, we also have the AU CESA 2016-2025, which seeks to ensure acquisition of requisite knowledge and skills, as well as improved completion rates at all levels and groups through harmonization processes and all the rest. Well, to achieve those education goals, we think that it is necessary to move beyond literacy and numeracy and deepen the breadth of skills within the education system. Well, as a result, the FR, which was adopted before the SDGs and other similar initiatives, Sub-Saharan Africa had recorded significant achievements in increasing access to education for many children, but unfortunately, the quality did not accompany the increase in numbers. Therefore, improving teaching and learning should become a top priority and challenges for national leadership and policy makers, especially those concerned with education improvements. Can we move to the next slide, please? So when we talk of quality of education, we are also talking not only of teachers, but also of curriculum. And the curriculum is one of the foundational elements of effective schooling and teaching. What we think is that it is necessary to develop a systemic approach to education with a particular focus on quality of teachers, of course, rigorous learning standards, of course, but robust curriculum, strong foundational skills with strong support services. And it's only these conditions that can ensure that all children are ready to learn. Next slide, please. Usually when we talk of a curriculum, to ensure whether the curriculum meets the needs, we use assessments. And we have, I want to mention three major assessment tools that we have been using. We have the Global PISA, and then we have the PASEC, which is applied in the French-speaking Africa, and then we have the UEZO, which is being implemented in 3 Eastern African countries. Well, for sake of time, I will not explain them, and since we have the slide, we can get them later. Next slide, please. Well, when we talk of assessment, so far, many of the assessment tools used come with some kind of punishments And because of that, the breadth of learning is being narrowed only to meet the assessment requirements. And we think that if we want to prepare citizens for the 21st century, we need to review the assessment methods and tools as well. Next slide, please. Well, in conclusion, we think that the effective change agents for Africa's sustainable development are those with skills in critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, collaboration and communication, culture and the arts, health and nutrition, computer literacy, just to mention these ones. And we think that these are very vital for the youth to thrive and change the economies of our society. So the development of such change agents can only be achieved through the implementation of a curriculum with adequate breadth and learning. So no curriculum is perfect. We know that. That's why they have been changing. But the curriculum to be effective needs to be deep, strong, and mainly to be accepted by teachers. And it should also be deemed educationally valid by other stakeholders in education, such as parents and the community at large. Next slide, please. Well, looking forward, we from EI, we are asking two questions. Do the numerous standardized assessments, usually coming with punitive consequences, have any real significance on learning outcomes? What pedagogical approaches and assessment method can help achieve the best learning outcomes for the 21st century Africa? So with these questions, we want to provoke the thinking and debates around the curriculum and assessment during this workshop. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Paddy. I'll just introduce myself to everybody. I'm Martin Henry. I'm the research coordinator at Education International. I live in Brussels, but I've worked in Africa a number of times. I've worked with UMICO for the past 3-4 years on the future of the teaching profession in Africa. And we've worked across about 14 African countries, Anglophone, Lusophone, and Francophone. And here today, we're going to be looking at the breadth of learning. And we're going to be starting with a discussion about how things work in terms of curriculum and about which stage of the curriculum you're at. So I'm going to share my screen just to show you a particular PDF, which you're not going to use now, but I'm just going to use to introduce the discussion we're having. So you're going to use this in a breakout room in about 30 minutes time. Now, every curriculum is at a particular stage of development. And I know from being in the session last week that you are all on different parts of the journey. So if we take the Kenyan example that we were looking at last week, they have just done a rewrite of their curriculum. So they're at that stage where they have rewritten and they're getting into implementation. Some curriculum are at the stage of refresh, where the curriculum has been sitting for a while. Teachers may be comfortable with it, but there may be a section of the curriculum that you're looking to update. For example, ICT, or it might be PE and health. And we will talk a little bit about that and how that might work. Or you may be in a consultation phase where you are talking to people about how the consultation around the curriculum is working. So we're at this point, I'm going to open up the floor to get an idea about where everybody is at in terms of their curriculum. And just in order to start the discussion going, I'm going to start with Joyce from Uganda. I'm going to invite you to the floor, Joyce. and see if you can tell us where your curriculum is at in terms of development. Have you just done a rewrite? Are you in a refresh? Are you in an implementation stage, or are you in a consultation phase? So Joyce, I'd like to invite you onto the floor.
Thank you very much, Martin. For Uganda, I'll talk about the lower secondary curriculum because we are at implementation stage. The curriculum was rolled out last year, just before we broke off due to COVID. And this has been implemented in a staggered manner, but the stage we are at is the implementation stage. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now I'd like to invite people from the floor who are at different stages of their curriculum to come and explain which stage they are at, because you're going to use this information in your next breakout. So do we have anybody? You can just raise your hand. I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can see your hands as they're being raised. Is there anybody who is at a rewrite stage, apart from Kenya, as we've heard from Kenya? Yvonne, is that Yvonne? No? Do we have any hands up?
Hello?
Yes, please,
Okay.
come to the floor.
All right, this is Nora from Nigeria. And for our country, we're still at the consultation level and partially at the so some of the consultations have gone far and implementing, yeah, but not really in full.
Okay, great. And thanks for coming to the floor. We did an exercise with this when we worked with 12, 14 countries around it, and we had people stand in circles, and we discovered exactly what you've just pointed out, Nura, is that different stages overlap. So one stage is not absolutely different from another. They bleed into each other. So when you go from rewrite to implementation, you have to have a plan about how you make that link work. So Betty, on you come.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Martin, I think you are just explaining what I wanted to raise, the issue of consultation. Joyce did speak to the lower secondary school curriculum, but right now, actually, I and Joyce, we are also in an organization where we are setting up a teacher education institution, and right now we are writing the curriculum. So at the primary, at the secondary level, the curriculum is in implementation, but we have this task to write the curriculum, and we are also doing consultations in the process. So I wasn't very sure what the consultation in this setting implies.
Okay, thanks, Betty. And you raise a really important question. As you're writing the curriculum, you have to go through a consultation phase. And so just so everybody's aware, I used to work for the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, as well as for the union, but at different times. When I was in the ministry, we did actually write the New Zealand curriculum, which is now going through a refresh. And as we were writing it, we worked with the teachers' unions, with teachers and with academics and with professional associations to develop the curriculum. So Betty, I think this is what you're asking, that as you go through that phase, we would ask all of you to ensure that you have all of those people, the crucial stakeholders around. And there are some curricula now that are also involving students. And I would ask you to think about the ways that you might do that, not by throwing the students into a situation where they can't handle writing the curriculum, but to assist them in feeding in so that they're able to give you information that you can interpret and help shape where it is you're going, as you might with a topic like climate change. Mabor, I'd like to invite you in now. And apologies if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. I'm Martin, by the way, not Henry, because we get them back to front. And I always feel it's like I'm at school when I get called Henry, because that's what the principal used to call me when he wanted to tell me off. But it's no problem, because we all have names that look different from different perspectives. So I'm looking at Mabor Tour. I'm going to come back to you, Mabor, because you're not unmuted, so we can't hear you. I'm going to ask Olive if she would like to take the floor, and I'll come back to Mabor afterwards. Olive.
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, nice and loud and clear.
Okay, this is fine. I'm reporting about Kenya. I think we are different, depends on the level. Primary, we have rewritten and are into implementation, but secondary, we are still rewriting. So at teacher education, we have finished the rewriting, we are just about to implement. So it depends on the level. So primary, we are in implementation, teacher education just about to implement, but secondary schools, we are rewriting. So we've just started with our grade 7. Thank you.
Okay, and it's great the way you're all aware of the overlaps that are going on, that you have to think about things in terms of the way it trickles into initial teacher education, the way you're working with CPLD, continuous professional learning and development, to make sure people are in touch with it, and you're keeping the fluidity between the different sections. So I'm going to go back to Mabor now. I saw you trying to unmute before, Mabor, so have another go, and hopefully this time we'll have you on the floor. Okay, we'll come back to you. William, I see you're unmuted. Come in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martin. I do appreciate this discussion. I think with regard, I'm from Zambia, working for Examinations Council of Zambia. In Zambia, I think the current curriculum we're implementing was first put in motion in 2014. And it affected all the different grades in the primary and secondary school. But I can confess that I think the teacher education, which is under the Ministry of General Education, I think did not have the accompanying changes. I'm sure the alignment came later. But the key lesson I want to share is that, just as you have said, I think it's a sort of dynamic, the mode of curriculum implementation. As soon as we have been implementing, although we are in implementation stage, there have been voices already that, well, this curriculum should be changed. And we are at a critical stage where we'll be having elections and a new government. And definitely when a new government or even the current one comes in, they might listen to the voices which have been raised as the curriculum has been implemented. And the other key lesson I observed is the issue of materials. The materials for the new curriculum. I think these require some good lead-in time.
Hello?
A good lead-in time is necessary for this. And in some cases, we found a situation whereby a curriculum was being implemented.
Sorry, William. Just wait, Mabor. We'll come to you afterwards. When William has finished speaking, I'll come to you. William, carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the final say, which is a key lesson even for others, that there was a gap in some cases where a new curriculum was implemented and materials were not ready. And I found that as a big gap and an inconvenience, or even as a barrier to effective curriculum implementation. And the other one, although our colleague who made the first presentation when he talked about systemic approach to quality education, he talked about teachers, curriculum, instruments, but I think he left out another key issue, which is of training, teacher training. It goes hand in hand, because in curriculum implementation, if teachers do not get it right, they implement whatever is in their mind. And it becomes a big problem that I learned these two key lessons on materials and teacher training, that there should be proper orientation if one or a country wants to be successful in its implementation of the curriculum. That's what I can say. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, William. And we have a phrase in cricket that
Yes.
you can see a slow ball coming towards you, which means that you've given me a really good platform for what I'm going to say in my presentation next. So thank you very much for that. I completely agree with you. And I will be picking these points up when I speak in my PowerPoint next. Thank you. And Mabur, you're on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Mabur from South Sudan. And I'm online here, and I'm joined by two colleagues from the Ministry of General Education. One is from Curriculum Development. His name is Bulan, is with me here. I also have a colleague from the same ministry, from the Secretariat of Examination. His name is Mading Manyok, that with me. The two of them are in the same computer. Our curriculum stages, of course, we have a curriculum that we have started, and because of time, we will give a chance to Bulan. He is here, we'll be talking about the stages of our curriculum of South Sudan.
Okay, thanks, Mabur. It's great that you have been so engaged with the discussion, because it gives me confidence that when we go into the breakout groups later, you're going to be able to identify the barriers and the enablers. Just as William just talked about a couple of barriers, I want you thinking during the presentation that I'm going to move into now about what those barriers and enablers are. And we're going to get you to write those down in the next session. Mabur, I'm going to ask you to turn your mic off now, because I'm going to go into a presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about curriculum and the way that it operates. So Mabur, your mic is still on, so thank you. So now I'm going to share a slideshow with you. And I'm going to talk you through. Can you all see the slideshow well? Marianne, if you can just let me know if they can see that okay.
I think it's showing up, Martin. I think you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to minimize this because I now have everybody on the chat. Now I have it. So the breadth of learning is something that I've been working on for a number of years. And this is a project that I did with the Brookings Institution, which works out of Washington, D.C. And it was funded by Lego Foundation, actually, is where the money came from originally. And we did some work in Zambia and in Kenya. And I'd just like to acknowledge my colleague from Kenya, Jadida, who is here and will be speaking to you all a little bit later in the meeting about how the Kenyan part of this research went. But it fits into a bigger picture because curriculum works around a whole number of areas. So what Brookings did is they set up a learning metrics task force, and Doug will talk about this a little bit later, which talked about the breadth that was required in curriculum. So we think about curriculum, and if you take the OECD tool, which is called PISA, then it only looks at English or literacy, whatever the language of the country is. It looks at mathematics, and it looks at science. Now, originally, that's all it did. It's actually opened wider since. What the Learning Metrics Task Force looked to do was to define the areas that you must have. And I would include health and PE here, which is why I've invited my colleague Doug to join us, because it's crucial that we have a curriculum that is broad enough to develop the whole child for the whole of their life. And we're going to be working a little bit more about that as the meeting continues. Now, the SDGs developed alongside this, and I'll talk about the SDGs in a minute. OECD, in their 2030 project, have also come up with a curriculum framework. And there actually are curriculum frameworks everywhere that you can use, you can look at, you can refine, you can help inspire where you might be going with your own. But I have to say that the curriculum must be contextual. And I will put in a bid here for everybody to make sure that they have a strand on climate change. When we did the analysis of African countries, there were not every country in Africa did not have this area in it. And yet we're all suffering as a result of the problems that are coming from climate change. We have a big campaign on that this year at Education International, but we all know it's a campaign around the world, and it's something that we all suffer from. I want to also stress the importance of the written, unwritten, and hidden curriculum, because the written curriculum is what you all see on the curriculum documents that you're talking about. The unwritten curriculum is what students experience in the way the curriculum is delivered and the way the school operates. So it's things that happen within the school environment that may not be written down, but are certainly teaching the students something about the way they should act. And then there's the hidden curriculum, which can be what happens behind the bike sheds. It can be in the way that relationships operate within the school. It can be things that need to be attended to in terms of making sure the environment is safe and secure and supportive for everybody. I've just put the link there that you all have had, which is to the report that we wrote and the work we did with that breadth of learning piece. I also want to bring in Professor Yusuf Saeed, who did an amazing report for us, which Yumiko is familiar with, but I will talk a little bit about here. So I'm not going to dwell on the SDG education targets, but they underpin what it is we're trying to do with curriculum. And it's very important that we're clear that in order to do that, you must do certain things. And I'll take you directly to 4C. You must substantially increase the supply of qualified teachers. And we have a professional standards framework that we developed with UNESCO, which is available to all of you. We can provide you links in the PowerPoint, which you will get later. That means that you should be writing professional standards with your teacher unions so that everybody is clear about what the standards are. And we believe that every teacher should and can be a good teacher. And as my colleague pointed out before, unless they have the materials and the training, they're not going to be able to do that. And they must have a PLD wraparound. CPLD you often use, I correct myself, so continuous professional learning and development to make sure that happens. I must start being a teacher unionist, as well as somebody who has been a teacher most of my life, with this question: are teachers to blame? So we don't want to point to teachers and play the blame game. We have to support teachers. So pedagogy is a word I like. It's not everybody's cup of tea because it's Greek in roots, but it does give me a very important shape around what it is we expect teachers to do. It's an act of discourse, and you are responsible in your countries for developing the discourse around how pedagogy works. It should be interactive, it should be student-centered, and it should be clear that the relationship between the teacher and the student is central to everything that happens in education. It's not the frameworks that you write or the bits of paper that are handed out, but the fact that you've got that relationship between teacher and student. I've got a slide here, which you can go back to later, which comes from Yusuf Saeed's work, which talks about the complexity of the things going into those student outcomes in the middle. And you're all aware of the complexities you're dealing with. So what we did in this study that Yusuf did for us is we looked at the following countries, and many of you are here. So Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, and Madagascar had particular challenges and practices. Not enough qualified teachers, motivation was low, needed raising, insufficient resources. Kenya, Malawi, South Africa, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, teachers' voice is not adequately captured in the policy formation. So I know Zimbabwe is here, and I've worked a lot with Sifiso, who is the General Secretary of ZIMTA, who has represented Zimbabwe superbly at the ILO in a recent meeting we had on the future of the teaching profession, where we got some very important outcomes about looking at how you involve green practices when you build schools, about how you negotiate around tech with the unions when you're using tech in education. And he is a very firm advocate on climate change education. So I just take my hat off here to Sifiso. Teachers are not fully equipped for changes. They need to be supported. Teachers' quality remains low. I will add that the Zimbabwe case from last week had the best model of appraisal that I heard from the examples that were given me. And they have a very strong education system, as do many of you. So how do you build on the strengths you have? And what are the challenges and things we need to uplift? So how do we make the new curriculum operate? I'm not going to go through all these because of time and I have my eye on the clock, but we need to be able to be clear that what we want to happen, and you can see from the innovations, there are some very serious innovations. If you look across group 2 there, 21st century knowledge, skills, and attitudes are coming into your curricula. And that's what we're talking about today. How we actually focus on those knowledge, skills, and attitudes and how we make them a reality. Competency-based curricula is what the subject of these workshops have been. You have to be able to describe to the student what it is they have to do, and you have to be able to support them to do it. I will connect competencies and how that works to productive capabilities a little later in the workshop. You also need a focus from your curricula on developing students who are going to be able to learn throughout their life, because we know that now what you teach today is not going to be the skills that necessarily that student is using in 10, 20, 30 years time. But you can teach skills of flexibility. I'm an English teacher and I taught Shakespeare from the day that I began till the day that I left teaching, but I didn't teach him the same way. There are many different ways to teach an old topic, and you need to be able to be responsive and able to shift to the learning of the students in front of you. And how are you creating that hunger for knowledge so that when I become a plumber and have to change my skills so that I can fix solar panels to houses so that we can generate electricity in a different way, then I might need a different set of skills. So let's not teach one set of skills which is stuck in one place. I've talked about SDG 4, so I won't go on about that anymore. Cross-cutting themes from the Mozambique curriculum were actually very forward-looking, and I'll talk about those a little bit as we go too. So there's more information here. I'm going to let you come back to that later because of time. Realizing the commitment to social dialogue is critical. If you don't involve your teacher unions in the work you're doing to implement, develop, and make the curriculum work, exactly what William said from Zambia is going to happen. You're going to have a disconnection that needs to be supported by resources and elsewhere. So what are 21st century skills and how might you use them? Well, child-centered education is different from what might be conceived as teacher-centered education. And when I started teaching in 1994, we'd already made that shift to child-centered education. I taught in New Zealand, even though I'm from Manchester, and it was a very a different experience of orienting around the child that some of my older colleagues struggled with. But it's a shift that you have to go through because we need to be able to respond to the needs of the learners. Child-centered education is the idea of curriculum as context. And I keep talking about this contextual issue. You know your country. I don't know your country anything like the way you do. So whatever I say about curriculum is only going to be relevant if it's responsive and works within the setting that you're working in. So there are gaps in the ecological vulnerability, and I've already touched on this. I'd encourage you all to make sure that you have environmental education in your curriculum, peace and conflict reconciliation, and we're going to have a new report out from Yusuf soon that looks at how education systems respond to shocks and crises. COVID is a crisis we've all struggled with, and I've been stuck in my house for a year, as many of you have. So have the students. How do we make them resilient and able to bounce back from that? Must be central to the way we're responding. But you have many crises to deal with. You have to make the system flexible to make that happen. Skills for life and skills for economic growth, critical. So teacher need should be development and not regulation. And this is where I would argue that your monitoring process should be closer to the ground, as close to the teacher as you can get. So the teacher having goals set, as we heard in the Zimbabwean case, by their principal and by their heads of department, etc. The closer you can get to the teacher, the better. Inspectorate is what they use in the country that I come from, England, and it can be a very blunt instrument. So think about that. You need to develop your teachers, not just regulate them. We've got to rethink PD models for curricular change. The cascade model doesn't work. So that's where we have a few best practice examples and then expect every school in the country to pick them up and respond to them. You need to have an infrastructure that supports every teacher in every school. And if you need to do that, as they do in the DRC, by having learning circles, which are very effective in Kinshasa, and then work out how to make those proliferate out, you have to have teachers supporting each other. But to support each other, they must have the right information. This is what William made me think about before. Curriculum should not arrive like thunder. This is a quote from Yusuf Said, but it struck me as absolutely true. If we write a new curriculum and then just drop it on the desks of teachers and expect them to use it, as has been pointed out by many of the colleagues, this isn't going to happen. So you have to think at how you're able to take teachers with you, because otherwise you'll have something on paper that isn't being used in the classroom. I'm going to move through a little bit more quickly now. Teacher well-being and student well-being are intrinsically linked. If you don't have teacher well-being in your minds, you're not going to be able to make critical citizens that are able to grow and develop the countries that you live in. So you have to connect teacher well-being to student well-being. Make sure that you have the right conditions, working conditions, pay and incentives, etc. The report link is there. You've got a whole lot of links to the tools that I've talked about there, including the professional standards work. And we're going to talk a bit about this BOLO tool, and that's going to come up as we come out of our next breakout. So I'll talk about this again when we come to it, but just to familiarize you with what we're thinking about here, this tool was built from the work that we did in Kenya and Zambia. In Zambia, we work with primary school students, teachers. In Kenya, we work with secondary school teachers. But what they've tried to do with this tool is cover every country, every classroom, every level. And I would argue that you'd be better making this tool specific for secondary schools, for primary schools. ECE, if you were going to cover that area too, would be different again. I want you thinking about which of these match your system and which don't. We're going to be working on that a little later. Acknowledgements, Jadida, who's here, is there. That's just the people we worked with. And that's me. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm following the Kix platform now. So that's the bit. I'm going to leave my screen now, and I'm going to come back to you all. screen sharing has stopped. So now we're going to go into breakouts, and we're going to go back to that document that we've already had some ideas from many of you about. So when you go into your groups, you have a PDF. If you can use the PDF, great. And it's there in the chat. Marianne's just dropped it in for us. I want you to write 3 barriers and 3 enablers to the level you are at with your curriculum development, and have a chat with each other about those barriers and enablers. We will find that there are a lot of similarities across systems wherever you're at in terms of your development. So think about it. We're going to come back then, and we're going to listen to Doug, and we're going to go back into groups and work on this a bit more. If you can write into the PDF, great. And the PDFs we've given you here, I would encourage you to use these with your colleagues in the ministry. And I'd also encourage you to think about how you might use some of these PDFs. And I'll acknowledge my colleague here, Angela Huang, who made these for us. Thanks, Angela. And you can use them with your colleagues, but also think about how you might want to use these with students to help you identify and define what's happening at various levels of curriculum development. So I'm just checking that I'm clear here. You're going to go into a breakout group. You're going to fill in that PDF. If you're on a phone and you haven't got access to the PDF, you can just write it in the chat within your group and talk to your colleagues about what you think is stopping your curriculum from working and what you think assists your curriculum in working. And it's going to be different in every country, but there are going to be similarities. So I'm going to move you now into your breakout groups. So I'm going to look at my colleague, Gabriel, and he's allowing us all to go now. So off we go. We're going to zoom off into our breakout groups. We'll see you all in a little while.
Welcome, Caroline. Caroline, oh, I think. Hi, Caroline. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Wonderful. So we just broke out into breakout rooms. So I'll just assign you to one.
Yeah, sorry, I had a meeting at the site and we delayed. Yeah, sorry.
No worries at all, no worries at all. Okay, I just added you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Stop some of those strands when we re-meet. When we re-meet in our groups again, I just remind you all, just if you could mute your microphones, please, while we have the plenary session. I'm now going to pass over to my colleague, Doug, who is going to talk to us about some of the ideas of how you make curriculum and safe schools fit together. He's from the International Healthy Schools Network, and as an old colleague and comrade of mine. So, Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Martin. And I think what I'm going to end up doing is maybe pulling a few things together, but just to look at the process of curriculum development and how it applies to health and wellness or health and life skills. And I'm going to turn off my video so that you can see the screen completely. Pleased to be here. Just a bit of background: I'm a former teacher, former union leader, a community organizer, and a lobbyist in a deep dark past. So I'll just click on the stopping the video, and I'll share my screen. I can find the right button. Here we go. And the slideshow should be Are you seeing the screen, but you may not be seeing the slideshow, right?
We can see the screen. Press play on the slideshow, Doug. If you press play, that button up the top, on the top bar, you see the triangle inside the, yeah, that's it. Press that. That should get you. Yes.
Okay. There we go. Live and learn. Thank you, Martin. So I thought it might be useful to go back a step and just pull the different pieces together. And this is a slide that tries to look at the various things that are related to a wide breadth of learning opportunities. And I start from that UN goal number 4, which is the overall goal of UN goal number 4 for education is to be inclusive and equitable. And there's particular emphasis on the vulnerable and the disadvantaged. And I think that's important to keep as a backdrop as we're working through these things. Another important concept is that school systems have different purposes, and not all the purposes going on to post-secondary education or training is one of those purposes, but there are others. There are vocational purposes, there are socialization purposes, and there are custodial or safeguarding purposes that also are equally important and need to be thought about. And so that's going to affect curriculum because the balance between those different purposes or functions is important. It will skew things in one direction or other if we don't keep it in that explicit in our minds. In offering a wide breadth of learning opportunities, we do need to think about the whole child. And so that child needs to be safe, healthy, engaged, challenged, and supported. And so doing that requires a broad number and a wide breadth of learning opportunities that include both what's going on in the classroom, but also what can be offered outside of the classroom in what researchers call extended education activities. Extracurricular, co-curricular, community-based, family-based, and more these days, online activities. So it's achieving that wide breadth of learning opportunities is not only restricted to the classroom, but also outside. In terms of getting that broad breadth of learning, a wide selection of core subjects and different pathways to graduation are required. Excuse me. And the most important part with all those most important part of this is all these pieces need to be coherent with each other. Coherent and understood is more than just alignment within a given context. It's coherence, as defined by Michael Fullen and others, is that it needs to be understood by everybody involved, the stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, the school leaders. And there's a shared understanding of what's important and what needs to be done. And so that's important. And that needs to be reflected in what we've called cross-curricular competencies, which is a broad framework describing the competencies to be developed by the entire curriculum. And there's been a lot of work around the world, both by UNESCO and OECD, and that is a good sign as to whether or not things are coherent if you take a look at those and those statements in each country and see how they're developed. And OECD has an excellent collection of those statements in many different countries. And last point is something from our work in school health promotion and is that you need a framework or a multi-component approach, which involves not only the curriculum and instruction, but support services, policy, the physical conditions in the schools if we're going to make things work. This slide may be a summary of some of the challenges that we identified in the small group just preceding. And the first one I think I'll emphasize a bit, because as a teacher union leader and as a lobbyist and a community organizer, I always thought that, especially as a union leader, that conflicts in terms of teacher strikes and collective bargaining was really political. And it is, but it's far less political than what is defined in curriculum policy. Because curriculum policy, in other words, what kids learn in school, is deeply rooted in society. It has to be negotiated among several interest groups. And it's not, I'm not talking political in terms of partisan politics among political parties, but the meaning that schools are trying to achieve is really deep rooted in society and is incredibly important and hard to move. The crowded nature of the curriculum landscape, the competition within the various subjects and the different models and ideas is challenging. Getting the design of curriculum is very difficult, and getting the right mix and scope of scope and sequence of the curriculum, those of you online will recognize those as well. Another facet which I think we need to understand is that we're working with documents and materials that often are quite a few years old. We're doing a project with UNICEF, which is going to be looking at gathering curriculum documents from every country and every province or state. And we're expecting that many of those will be several years old. So it's hard to implement a curriculum that is starting. We need to understand that it takes 10 to 12 years to implement a new curriculum in a new subject. Cross-curricular design is even more challenging, and yet is often seen as a kind of a panacea. There's too much knowledge and too many skills that we're trying to cover. So we'll say, well, we'll just cover it in all the subjects. And we kind of avoid the responsibility of designing well thought out, specific and practical curricula in the different subject areas. And also as part of that is to define the implementation, the objectives that can be achieved by all students. We often, and I've been on curriculum committees that have done that, where people define what is optimal rather than what is possible or practical. And we need to think about that as a barrier. The last one has come up a little bit in their discussions thus far. The implementation in what is often loosely coupled, multi-layered education systems who have semi-autonomous professionals at all levels, not just teachers, but at all levels, is very challenging. We've talked about the blame game, and we need to think about just dropping that whole idea, because blame is not going to be assigned to teachers or to school principals or to middle managers or to curriculum developers. We need to think about, really be patient with each other, and to think about how we can help each other in each of our jobs. And recognizing that we each have a professional obligation to think through and to make sure that it is meaningful and practical and appropriate for those at every level. The second to last point, the true amount of time required is something that is rarely recognized. We expect schools to transform themselves within a period of a couple of years, and it's just not feasible. A 10 or 15 year time period for almost any program is the kind of expectations we should have. And the last thing, which is really something that we need to think about, which is that idea that if we have a coherent, contextually relevant system, then we'll have better cohesion and better achievements. And it's it's an adaptation of that think global, but act locally. Just as an illustration of the many domains, and this is an adaptation from the work that Martin referred to, the Learning Metrics Task Force. This broke that definition of learning domains into several. It gets closer to the kinds of subjects that most countries offer, but you can see that it's pretty crowded just to look at it. And then we have even a broader version, which is looking at how different ideas outside of that frame of those learning domains are the number of ideas that are being pushed at schools: life skills, social emotional learning, faith and spirituality, social responsibility, student agency and you can just go through that list. All those ideas are thought of and brought into and brought into school systems and clamor for attention, and sorting them out in a practical way through curriculum takes time. And so that's the thought that I'd like to leave you with there. I'm not going to spend too much time on health and wellness because it's just an example of, but here we've talked about the hidden and not so obvious curriculum, but there's many pieces. And this slide is an attempt to capture the child at the center with all the different subjects in that inner circle, the UN goals around the outer circle, and then all the pieces that relate to health and life skills, to health and personal and social development around the side. And you can see the number of pieces that are brought into play when we look at health and life skill, health and personal and social development. If you look at the curriculum there, the red font has different aspects of health and personal and social development in different subjects, be it social studies, which is civic participation, in terms of art and music, as well as health and life skills, home economics, and physical education. Here's a set of mistakes that we in the health sector have made in trying to promote a core curriculum in health and life skills education. I'm just going to, this is painful for some of us, and including me in this, because we've made a few mistakes over the years, no more than a few. And one of them, and most importantly, I think, is that the health sector has focused, because of their work in responding to diseases, that we come at schools with a disease of the day kind of approach, rather than developing a set of generic skills and knowledge and attitudes. And so that constant changing of demands from the health sector scares people, scares educators, scares educational decision makers away from committing to a comprehensive, coherent health and life skills education. And I'm just going to, you can read through those barriers and the mistakes that we've made over the years. I think they apply to other subject areas, but I think they're important to think about as we move forward. And one of them, staying with the theme of teachers, is that health and life skills teachers are probably the lowest status teachers in the profession. There's lots of turnover. There's studies showing that there are some dedicated teachers who are really taking interest in health and life skills education, but there's a lot of turnover or churning as people move on to higher profile and higher regarded assignments in teaching. And there are very few secondary specialists in health and life skill teachers. And there are only, if you look around the world, there are only 2 national teacher associations, specialist teacher associations committed to health education. So that's a sign of the lack of status, whereas if you look at science or math or even physical education, there are an abundance of those specialist teacher associations almost in every country. And then the COVID pandemic, I think, is giving us a real opportunity to move forward. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on arguing this particular case, but I'm just going to start with that one key bullet, which is, if you look at the UN goals, where equity and equity and inclusion are the most important parts, it's ironic that if you look carefully through the goals that Martin showed on the screen, there's one aspect, one core subject area that is not being monitored as we move forward through the UN goals, and that's in health and life skills education. Everything else is being covered: literacy, numeracy, global citizenship, environmental education.
2 minutes, Doug.
Education for sustainable development. But the COVID pandemic has really emphasized that hygiene, vaccine literacy, caring for others, mental health, digital and media literacy, and to know where you can find good health information has never been more important. So it's really easy to sort of step back from health and life skills education, to have a gap. Martin mentioned the climate change really making its way into the curriculum. We would argue that health and life skills education is also a gap that needs to be covered. And so that's the thoughts I'd like to leave with you. Perhaps the first few slides, which show how difficult curriculum development and implementation is important, it is for people. And maybe one last thought about monitoring and reporting. The FRESH partners that Martin and I work with, a coalition of UN agencies and NGOs, we've been looking at a term called monitoring and reporting, evaluation, and improvement. In my view, monitoring and reporting that does not lead to a systematic improvement plan process where people are supported to make professionally autonomous decisions about their own work is just going to be an accounting exercise, which is not going to have the kind of impact it should on true performance of schools. And I'll leave that thought as a closing one. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. We're going to change gears slightly because we were going to do the next session back in our breakout groups, but we're actually going to do it in plenary instead. And I'm going to see if one of my colleagues can share the screen, or I can do it. If we can get the screen up, which has the picture. I'll try and do this now. If you just bear with me, I've got to get rid of this thing down there.
My screen.
Okay, that's superb. So we've got up there. We're going to do this in terms of a Jamboard. You're going to have a Jamboard and you've got stickies available to you. If you know how to use the Jamboard, you can go on and get the sticky. And we are going to be talking about the Bolo tool that you've all been looking at. So I'm going to ask you now, Gabriel, if you can put the Jamboard up. You're going to write on here, and you're going to find a sticky. So I'm going to give you an example, and you take the sticky from over there, and you're going to write on it. What are the things that you need to do to change the Bolo tool into something that you can use in your local context?
Martin, can you remind everybody what the Bolo tool refers to? It was emailed to them about a week ago, but there may be some participants who weren't part of that email chain, and maybe we could remind them of the Bolo tool.
Okay, I'm going to ask you now, Gabriel, have you got the Bolo tool on your slide in front of you? The tool slide. If you don't, I can do it. If you just stop sharing, I'm going to share my slide, and I'm going to show them what the tool is. So excuse the technical wizardry, but we just have to move from one thing to the other. Here it is. I'm going to share this now. So this is the Bolo tool here. So I'm eating, food and nutrition, physical activity, sexual health. So does your curriculum values, and you've just heard from Doug, and for those who know me, I'm passionate about education that works around the whole of the child. So we can't just think about English and maths. We have to think about all of the things that makes a student a productive and capable person who can live in society. And what are their civic values? What's their mental health and well-being? Creative arts, cultural knowledge, oral fluency, oral comprehension, reading fluency, reading comprehension, receptive vocabulary, expressive vocabulary, written expression composition. And this is only part of what it is we have to talk about. I'm actually going to open this up now to the floor. I'm going to invite you in to let me know your perspective. Do you think you could use a tool of this nature that could fire it a little? And I'm looking around here at who I could ask to come to the mic. So I'm going to go to Yvonne.
Martin, Yvonne is one of the members of UNESCO ICFA, so maybe we could call on someone else instead.
Okay, yes, sorry. Joe, you're
No
on.
problem.
Thank you very much. I had an opportunity to look at the tool that has been that was sent to us, and apparently when I saw it, I think the tool is just in good shape. The particulars, whatever things that have been provided on the same tool, they are very essential, and I think as it stands for me, I see it's just in good standing, and it's something that we can use.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to go to you, Olive, next. I'm going to invite you. It's not compulsory, but unless we have a hand up, I'm just going to call some people into the discussion. I'd like to know, yes. Do you think, Olive, you could use this tool as it is, or you would need to alter it to fit your curriculum?
Yes, I looked at, can you hear me?
Yes, nice and clear.
Yes, I looked at the, what are you calling it? I looked at it and I looked at all the areas, and mostly they relate to the curriculum we have in this country, except we might have to change some, like when you say sexual health, it becomes a very touchy subject in Kenya. So we may have to look for a broader name. So we may have to change it slightly, but I thought it was very comprehensive.
Thanks, Olive. And it's good you bring that issue up, because I insisted that we put sexual health in this tool, because I know what a problem it is. We have many girls in Africa who are getting pregnant too young.
Yes.
We have a lot of work that we're doing around this. And we also know there are issues with sexuality, education, etc. And so it's up to the country to mold that question. But I think it's absolutely critical that we put it in people's minds. So I like the fact you're being creative there, Olive, about how you can frame it in a way which means you can teach it and talk about it, but not frighten the horses. So next up is William.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Martin. My two immediate observations are that, number one, I like the idea of literacy and communication being there, because although we are talking about curriculum here, there has been a big hindrance all over the world. There's what the World Bank describes as the learning poverty, which talks about 90% of the learners at the age of 10 not being able to read. And the World Bank is trying to push that agenda. So what I'm trying to say, first of all, is that the aspects on literacy and communication are excellent, because they can help reduce what the World Bank calls the learning poverty. But the other thing which has surprised me is that you haven't catered for numerous, which is very important in the curriculum, numerous or mathematics. I've scanned my eyes and I haven't seen the category on the top there, which deals with numerous, it seems to be missing. And the third thing, countries, especially developing countries, are looking towards industrialization, and there calls for the need for technology. I can't see it there, the issue of technology. Of course, there's creative arts, but there is need to start the issue of technology at a very early age, not to leave it at the end of 9 years or later at the end of secondary schools. The issue of technologies should start at an early age. Those are my observations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, William. And again, you've set me up for a really important point. This is just one page of the tool. And if you go into the link to the BOLO tool, you will see there's another page on numeracy, etc. And there's also got ICT in there and all those elements. So when you go into the link to the BOLO tool and you have a look at the whole tool is 28 pages long. So I've only given you one page because I didn't want to confuse everybody with all the information all at once. But you raise a crucial point. I would argue that every country, you have to make sure you cover the whole breadth. So you have to find a way of doing that.
And Martin, before I go, there's yes, thank you. There is a remarkable observation I've made in this dialogue regarding curriculum. Again, my experience shows me that no matter how much we talk about curriculum and then we do not in tandem or in congruence keep the issue of assessment on hand, then there can always be a mismatch in the implementation of curriculum. And I just want to cite you an example of what we are doing in Zambia. In Zambia, us from the assessment body are moving towards reforming a lot of assessment. I've seen comments on even the first presenter, high stakes exams. We are introducing school-based assessment at all levels gradually. And our idea is to, as we broaden this, to reduce the summative and help to support the curriculum with school-based assessment. Because I've observed that sometimes countries can write a curriculum, but there's always a distortion or disorientation or misalignment when it comes to the type of assessment. Because even this breadth of learning opportunities, we can promote it with the well-defined assessment, which focuses on first starting up with the clear standards. Even the standards like if we want skills, we should do make the assessment help the curriculum to have learners learn about this 21st century skills. Assessment can play a key role rather than just drafting the learning points. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, William. And I will say that I think there is absolutely a role for assessment here. I think that with the social and emotional skills, and I've been quite active about this at OECD, I don't think you should be assessing one student in your class as being better at caring than another, because you can create issues within the class about how you're measuring and responding. You've given us a perfect link to the next task, because what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into our breakout groups and we're going to talk about the 21st century skills. So what are the 21st century skills that you all think that students need in order to prepare them for the life that they're going to lead through this 21st century? So if we take the skill of thoughtfulness, then what does that do to develop their productive capabilities, which means they're going to be able to learn throughout their life? So I'd like you to think about that, because then you can work out, as you go back to your PDF, you can fill in the boxes. I know some of you struggled with the PDF before. If you can't work out the PDF, which is in the chat there now, you can pick it up from the chat. If the PDF isn't working for you, if you can write in the chat, like we were in my group. So you look there at the 21st century skill. What is the skill that you're defining? And what do you think it's going to help them do for the rest of their life? And everybody often will talk about skills like respect, growth mindset, etc., creativity. What are the ones that you think you absolutely must need to be a good citizen, to be a more full person? So don't restrict yourself to ones you've heard before. Kindness is always my favorite, but you can think about what you think those skills need to be and how you might open the student up. So we're going to go into our breakout groups now, and you will be in there till 10 to. So you've got 15 minutes in this breakout group. Off we go. We'll see you all in a bit.
Hi, Janet.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome. We just broke out into breakout rooms, so I'll just assign you to one of the rooms.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
bua ne ke re ka bona le signal nna ke ne yona ka mo. Helele. Wena o na le signal ka mo. Ke feng ke e bontshang e thuli e ya bolo. Ke e
Nna ka monana o tsebe e ntse thuthumela fela ha hona letho. Ke meleko. Okay. Ke jwale. Okay, hi. Hi, Wadi. Wa ke re pele bo tla ba ntsha sa itse mosebetsi ke
I'm going to pass straight to Jadida now. Usually we would like to have had feedback from each group, but we've run out of time, I'm afraid. And I am going to give the last word to Jadida because Jadida wrote our Kenyan report, and she's going to give us a few highlights from that report on what she discovered as she surveyed the breadth of learning in Kenya. So Jadida, over to you.
Hello.
Yep, we've got you loud and clear. So on you go, Jadida.
I'm just going to present my study. I don't know whether I can be able to share. Let me share. Okay, that is my study, the study that we did in Kenya.
Just Jadida, before you carry on, we've got an echo. You may have two mics connected at the same time. Is it okay if you turn the other mic off? But we can see the study, so off you go.
Okay, fine. We did a study on the assessment of the breadth of learning in public schools, public secondary schools in Kenya. Due to time, I think I'll just have to share my presentation, and I'll go direct to In the introduction, we can say that education is more concerned about, and especially education in most of the developing countries is more concerned about the quantitative expansion rather than concentrating on the qualitative aspect. However, we need to emphasize that there's need for the education to develop the range of skills, as well as transform learners to be mindful and empathetic, or have the 21st century skills, which is the core of the breadth of learning of skills, which is mainly to provide the learners with values and skills so that they can further personal growth, enhance critical thinking, encourage innovation, as well as being education is mainly I will just summarize the few objectives that we have, which is to prepare students to make a positive contribution to the society, as well as acquire the knowledge and skills, cultural values, attitudes of self-respect, that is within the bracket of the breadth of skills. We have subjects, learning areas, which, as you can see, the languages, the sciences, both applied, humanities, creative, and technical subjects. I'll just head off to the objective of the study, because the purpose was mainly to assess the appropriateness of breadth of learning opportunities across the 7 domains in the public schools in Kenya. And part of the objectives, we were looking at the qualification of teachers who are teaching the subjects in the public schools, whether the public schools have been equipped with the adequate and appropriate teaching and learning materials and facilities. We also examining the time spent on teaching, learning, as well as addressing other students' needs that were vital for the holistic development of the learner, as well as establish the professional support accorded to the teachers. The main vision was to provide the national government with the ability to examine our education system, target interventions that are towards the learning domains, as well as diagnose the problems within our education with the help of fine-tuning our policies to provide broad opportunities for learning. And the tool that we used is generally the tool that we have, which the governments were to support, so that we can be able to increase breadth and depth of learning in our schools. We developed the tool with the EI team, that is Martin and the team, as well as the NAT research department, the NAT leadership representatives, as well as the teachers. These teachers, we selected the best teachers. The best teachers were nominated from different regions, dealing with specific domains or specific subject areas. So we had teachers who are either deputies or head teachers of head of departments for the different subjects. The tool was further reviewed by experts in different subjects before it was adopted for the piloting. How did we select the teachers? The teachers who came for the workshop, who are trained on this tool were mainly from different school categories, school types we have, as well as different social settings in our Kenyan schools. They were also experts in their teaching subjects and extracurricular activities. They also had leadership skills, as most of them were school deputies, as well as head of departments. The training mainly had 3 objectives. One was to sensitize the teachers on the breadth of learning concept, the breadth of learning study. We also used, with the teachers, we also designed, reviewed the tool that is there, and also developed a tool that is relevant to the Kenyan context. Then also we were able to sensitize them on the data collection approach. For the research, we were targeting the public secondary schools, the principals, as well as the head teachers, the head of departments, subject departments, as well as teachers. We use sampling where we had at least 4 schools per county, 40 principals, as well as over 280 head of departments. But the teachers, we were bringing the teachers together. Teachers of different subjects would come together and will respond to the tool. So we may not have the exact number, but based on the number of schools, there was that. So this is how we selected the schools, the category. In Kenya, you know, in our secondary schools, we have national schools, we have extra county schools, and sub-county. The settings were based on whether it's a rural school or it's a school within the urban setting. And also we were looking at the type of the schools, that is schools that have boarding facilities, schools that have that don't have boarding facilities, or both mixed boardings and day schools. Both genders, the boarding, the boys and girls, and mixed schools. So in all the counties, yes?
Jadida, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up now, because we have to give some minutes to the team as well to give people some information. So if you go to your conclusions, I think what you've pointed out is critical. The way you selected schools was absolutely superb and meant you got a really good cross-section. So if you could just go to the end and just give us your conclusions and just wrap up, that would be great. Thanks.
Well, the teacher tool looked at the 7 domains, and mainly it covered on the qualification of the teachers, the time they spent, the resources, the support that was given, the class sizes, as well as the impact. So maybe just a few on the findings, especially on the qualification. We realized that the teachers, qualification of the teachers who are teaching the subject is, we realized most of the teachers who are teaching culture and arts, life skills, as well as PE, that is physical education, were not trained. And you can see the percentages of the teachers who are teaching but have not been trained in all those domains. We also have teachers who are teaching the compulsory subjects, but still some of them, most of them are not trained. Then the criteria that was used is used for teaching, for selecting the teachers to teach, is not mainly on the training. It is actually on whether they have, whether they're in charge of those classes, or whether they have an interest or they have a gap in their teaching workload, which that is an area that needs to be taken a keen concern on, because it should be mainly on education. If you look at availability of facilities, most of the schools don't have most of these sports facility, yet we still need our learners to have these skills. Yes, I can't finalize this. Yes, even in the subjects like mathematics and sciences, we still have a lot of schools that don't have the required facilities, even up to mathematical sets and all the necessary facilities. They don't have special rooms in those schools. Support given to the teachers, you realize that most of the teachers noted that they were not supported. There's no professional development they were given for them to improve on their teaching. Our recommendation was mainly to the government to endeavor to incorporate teaching of the range of skills that will transform learners to be mindful and have the 21st century skills, as well as there was need of monitoring the syllabus, coverage, and time allocation, because one of the other bits that we realized is that the time allocated for some of these subjects is, some of these subjects have no allocation in the timetables, or those that are allocated, the teachers are not using the times that are given, like the hours that are given. So it's also for policymakers to formulate the policies that will guide the implementation of non-examinable subjects to effectively enhance the implementation of the 21st century skills. Thank you.
Thanks, Jadida. Thank you for your efforts, and we will share the slideshow with everybody. I'm afraid, Mabul, we can't bring you in because we have to take the time now to go back to our team, our organizing team, and let them wrap up. So I'm glad so many of you have hung in there, and we've had great engagement, and I just want to thank you all for having me. And it's been an amazing experience working with you. So I look forward to hearing about how your curriculums develop over the next little while. So I'm going to pass back to you, Marianne, or whoever's taking the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Mabor, we kindly ask you to put your question in the chat box. We'll endeavor to answer, whether it is to Kix or to Martin and Tim. Kindly put your question in the chat box. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank you for participating in this session. And we are kindly requesting that you give us feedback. We have posted on the chat box a link to a survey. The survey will only take 5 minutes. There are only 2 major questions there that we need you to just fill and share with us. This will enable us also to work better in future and plan better. As we are almost coming to an end, I would also like to call a colleague, Dr. Victoria Kisache. That is our project officer at UNESCO ICBA and is the focal point for KICS Africa 19 Hub. Victoria, kindly just say a word or two. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And I just want to really express my appreciation to the team. I'm going to apologize. I can't put on my video because we don't have electricity where I am right now. But I'm listening in very carefully, and I want to thank you so much, especially the team from Education International, for the great facilitation. I want to thank everybody who has participated in this wonderful learning event. I was getting more and more excited, especially with the level of participation and the interest and the fact that we are finding these learning events very, very useful. I want to thank you very, very much for your presence, your sharing, the experiences that you've shared from Kenya, from everywhere. And I really want to thank also my colleagues led by Marianne and Yvonne and Geb and Bezoit for the great work that they're doing. So I know that time is fast spent. I'll just leave it at that. But on behalf of the director, Yumiko Yokozaki, thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to more interaction. And thank you once again to the team from Education International. Truly appreciate you. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I can see comments from the chat box, and someone is saying that we need to have more of the discussions. So please, like I said, there's a survey that is we've posted. Kindly just put it in that survey so that we'll be able to know what aspects of this particular discussion would you like us to go into details in and discuss further. That is one way of you letting us know what else you want us to focus on. And as we come to a close, I would also like to call Gabriel, my colleague Gabriel, just to show us the KICS portal for 2 to 3 minutes. So I kindly request you to be patient with us. Just give us 2 to 3 minutes, please. And as we listen to Gabriel, let us continue filling in the survey. And please give us all your points there. We'd really love to know what else you need so that you can provide. Thank you. Gabriel, please come in.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Yvonne. And as my colleagues have mentioned, we've been having some excellent discussions, and I just want us all to check out the Copano page, which is having a lot of lively and fascinating and insightful discussions. And so we encourage and we ask that folks still keep using Copano, but at the same time, we also wanted to introduce GPE KICS as portal. And so this allows people to have a greater network, as all the 4 KICS hubs are part of this consortium of sorts. And so there are people from Western Africa, Asia, Pacific, Europe, and so forth. And so I'm just very quickly going to try logging in, because I think some of the feedback we received is sometimes there's a little bit of difficulty with that. So I have gone to GPE KICS website, and I believe everyone or most people should have had received emails and passwords. And so as you do log in, I think the next part is where people have shared that they've had some difficulties where they get this one-time password. And so this is the email I had registered in. And so it gives me a password. And so I'm able to just input a one-time passcode. And once I've input the one-time password, I'm able to access the GPE portal. And the place where I want to emphasize is the discussions part of the portal. And this is a place where you can continue engaging and talking about some of the great content that we have discussed. And so, for example, you can suggest a new topic and you'll be able to engage together. And so that, I think, if someone doesn't have an account or a password that's been shared, please let us know, and then we will follow up. And so I will hand it over back to you, Yvonne. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. So I can see we are well over time, and people have started leaving. So Marianne, unless you have any last word to the participants, kindly, so that you can release them. Thank you very much.
No further words, Yvonne. Thank you so much. It's been great. We've just started today. We have a lot more to discuss naturally on these topics. We can do so on the platforms that Gabriel showed. So thank you so much to everybody who's here. I think we can start logging off then. If I can request the facilitators to stay online for 10 more minutes, just to wrap up and discuss amongst ourselves, but the participants can begin leaving whenever they'd like to.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye, everyone. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Marianne. I thought we might need a wrap up.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marianne. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next